They didn't even pretend to care. We've decided to restructure the client engagement division, Evelyn. Today will be your last day. The words echoed across the pristine glass conference room like a cold gust of wind. I sat motionless, staring at Gavin Royce, the new managing partner at Carrington and Blake, who had joined just 8 months ago with his Harvard MBA, buzzword-heavy PowerPoint slides, and a reputation for ruthless efficiency. His face was a corporate mask, somewhere between feigned sympathy and mechanical detachment. After 25 years. We appreciate everything you've done, Gavin continued, sliding a sealed manila folder across the table like a transaction. HR has arranged for 2 months' salary, and your benefits will continue through the end of the quarter. Next to him, Janice, the HR director, gave me a look I couldn't quite read, part apology, part survival instinct. She avoided eye contact. It's part of a broader organizational realignment, she said softly. It doesn't reflect on your performance. Didn't it? I was 57 years old, the most senior employee in the client engagement team by a decade. My compensation reflected that seniority. My experience, my relationships, my name, those were cornerstones of this firm. And yet here I was, being dismissed like an outdated brochure. Does Calvin know? I asked. Calvin Blake, the firm's founder, the man who hired me 25 years ago when Carrington and Blake operated out of a shared WeWork space. Gavin's jaw clenched. All partners were consulted. Translation: Calvin's out of town, and Gavin made the call. Best of luck, Gavin added with a final smile, plastic and cold. Security will escort you to clear your desk. I helped write that protocol 12 years ago, and now it was being used on me. My name is Evelyn Hart, and until 10 minutes ago, I was the senior director of client engagement at one of Chicago's most prestigious consulting firms. My job wasn't flashy. I didn't chase headlines, but I built trust. I helped make Carrington and Blake irreplaceable, not because of clever branding, but because of relationships. I knew what clients needed before they asked. I knew their histories, their fears, their blind spots, and I was being tossed out for being legacy. Security trailed me awkwardly as I packed up my office. I moved slowly, deliberately. My framed photo with the team at the Langwell Biotech fundraiser, a handwritten note from Douglas Chen at Westvale Capital, thanking me for saving a critical account in 2014, the crystal paperweight Calvin gave me at my 20th anniversary. Each item was a chapter in a story I wasn't done telling. My phone buzzed as I closed the last box. Harriet Lang, CEO of Langwell Biotech, our largest client. Just heard something troubling. Are the rumors true? Call me ASAP. I glanced up and saw Gavin in his office, already on the phone, likely trying to spin the narrative before I could. What he didn't understand, what none of them understood, was that client trust wasn't built by title or by memo. It was built over years, through late-night calls, remembered birthdays, and battles fought together. And I had just been cut off from 25 years of those relationships with a signature and a smile. I joined Carrington and Blake in 1998 when we had 17 clients, a shared receptionist, and rented office furniture. Calvin hired me because, as he put it, anyone can manage accounts. You build trust. That's rarer. He was right. Over the years, while others chased promotions or played politics, I made myself indispensable to our clients. I tracked their milestones, studied their business models, and learned the nuances of their corporate cultures. Some called me a human CRM, but I was more than that. I was part of their team, even if I wore a different badge. You're the firm's backbone, Calvin once told me. But spines are easy to sever when they become inconvenient. The shift began 2 years ago, when Carrington and Blake accepted outside investment. With it came new leadership, new KPIs, and a growing obsession with quarterly metrics. The client's first philosophy, Calvin built the firm on, quietly eroded into a new motto: deliver maximum value. Gavin Royce embodied the change: smart, charming, and cold as ice. Turnover increased. Long-time team leads were pushed out, and relationships were replaced with efficiency funnels. I raised my concerns at a leadership meeting 6 months ago. We're sacrificing long-term loyalty for short-term margins, I warned. Gavin smiled tightly and replied, "The market's changing, Evelyn. Adapt or get left behind." A week later, I stopped receiving invites to strategic meetings. Still, I assumed my client portfolio would protect me. After all, I directly managed accounts representing over 60% of our yearly revenue. Harriet Lang alone brought in nearly $4 million annually and had insisted in her contract that I remain her primary liaison. But last week, I overheard Gavin on the phone. This restructure lets us trim the legacy fat. Their retirement packages would cost millions anyway. I should have seen it coming. Now, 3 days after my dismissal, I sat in my apartment surrounded by half-filled boxes and unread messages. My LinkedIn was blowing up. Apparently, being publicly humiliated made me fascinating for 72 hours. The phone rang again. My landline, of all things. "Evelyn," the voice said with a sharp British accent. "It's Calvin. I just landed from London. I just heard... Tell me it's not true." My throat tightened. "It is. This wasn't authorized by me," he said, anger rising. "They waited until I was abroad. They forced it through under emergency justification." "Well, it's done. You deserve more than a 10-minute meeting and a security escort." I did. "I want to fix this," Calvin said. "Come back. We'll call it a miscommunication." "It's not that simple. Gavin called me legacy fat, Calvin." The silence on the line told me everything. In the corporate world, once you're undermined, you don't come back. Not truly. Not with authority. Not with respect. I'm sorry, Evelyn. You built this firm. And now they're watching it collapse without understanding why. "Your clients," he began. I cut him off. "Are already hearing about it. You'll be lucky to keep half." When the call ended, I looked at my buzzing phone again. Harriet Lang, Douglas Chen, Belinda West. 11 calls. None from recruiters, all from clients. I hadn't made a single call. I didn't have to, because relationships don't retire quietly. By Monday morning, the silence was gone, replaced by a chorus of buzzing phones, back-channel emails, and client unease. The news of my departure from Carrington and Blake had traveled faster than anyone at the firm expected. I hadn't reached out to a single client, yet my inbox was filling with subject lines like, "What happened? We're concerned. Please call me." It was 7:38 a.m. when Harriet Lang called. "Tell me you're not actually gone," she demanded without preamble. "I'm afraid I am," I said, still groggy, pouring my first cup of coffee. "Restructuring," she snapped. "That's what they told me, that you're being replaced by Melissa Bennett." Melissa, a junior partner who once tried to explain Harriet's own company to her in a pitch deck. "She's enthusiastic," I said carefully. "Enthusiastic and clueless," Harriet replied. "I don't want someone who needs to be brought up to speed on 12 years of work. I want you. So, Evelyn, where are you going next? I haven't made any decisions yet. Well, decide quickly, she said. Our contract is up for renewal in 60 days. And if you're not at Carrington and Blake, neither are we. She hung up without waiting for a reply. I stared at the phone for a long moment. That call should have filled me with satisfaction. But instead, it stirred something deeper. Responsibility. These clients weren't just names in a spreadsheet. They were people who had trusted me with their reputations, budgets, and strategy. And they were now being told their loyalty was irrelevant. By noon, I had received similar calls from 5 other major clients. By dinner, the number was up to 11. Each one told me the same thing in different ways. You understood us. We don't trust what comes next. Wherever you go, we'll follow. Still, I hadn't made any moves. Not yet. That changed the following night when I met Clara Belmont at a quiet restaurant in Lincoln Park. Clara wasn't just any recruiter. She was a fixer, a connector, the kind of woman who could make or break an executive career with a single call. She walked in wearing her signature black trench coat, set down her leather-bound folder, and gave me the kind of look that said, "You're the story this week. You're the talk of the industry right now," she said, after ordering a glass of wine. "Gavin Royce just made a catastrophic error." "Perhaps," I said, trying to sound neutral. Clara smirked. "You always were diplomatic. That's part of your appeal." She opened the folder and slid it across the table. Inside were 3 letters of interest, all from consulting firms I had heard of, all eager to speak to me. 2 were even creating custom leadership roles to bring me on board. Then I saw the numbers. I nearly dropped my fork. They weren't just offering me a job. They were offering double my former salary, full benefits, relocation bonuses, and most importantly, equity. Clara saw my reaction and leaned in. "They're not paying you for your resume, Evelyn. They're paying for your little black book." The irony wasn't lost on me. The firm that called me too expensive was now watching their competitors place a premium on everything they had just thrown away. I looked up at Clara. "Have any of them mentioned client expectations?" "All of them," she replied. "In fact, I've already heard from 2 who received calls from Langwell and Westvale, expressing interest in following you. Quietly, of course." That night, I returned home, folder in hand, and sat by the window overlooking the skyline. The city looked different, like it had opened up. Possibilities I hadn't considered in years were suddenly right in front of me. I wasn't just a veteran account director. I was the foundation of client loyalty for a firm that had just amputated its heart. And it wasn't over. The next morning, my phone rang again. Calvin Blake. His voice was tense, more urgent than before. "Evelyn, we need to talk. Can you come into the office?" "I don't think that's appropriate," I said. "Then lunch. The Harvest. 1 o'clock. He didn't wait for me to agree. He just hung up. Curiosity got the better of me. At 1 sharp, I walked into the Harvest and found Calvin already seated. He looked older, more frazzled than I remembered. His tailored suit hung looser than it used to. "Thank you for coming," he said, standing as I approached. "I wasn't sure I would. I've been trying to fix this, but Gavin's blocking me at every turn," he admitted. "He's convinced the board that your departure was necessary for modernization." "And the clients?" I asked. He winced. "Not responding well. Harriet Lang is demanding a meeting. Douglas Chen is reviewing their agreement. 3 smaller clients have already pulled out." He leaned forward, dropping his voice. "Here's what I'm proposing. I create a new executive position, Chief Client Officer, reporting directly to me. Full autonomy, better compensation. It sounded perfect. A week ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. But now, I studied his face. His concern wasn't just professional. It was personal. It was self-preservation. "What aren't you telling me, Calvin?" He hesitated. Gavin has been quietly building alliances with the new partners. He's planning to push me into early retirement. If the client situation deteriorates further, he'll have the leverage he needs. So that was it. Calvin wasn't trying to save me. He was trying to save himself. "I'm sorry, Calvin," I said, "but I already have meetings scheduled with other firms." "You understand. Business decisions aren't personal." I watched his face pale as I repeated Gavin's words back to him. It almost made the entire ordeal worth it. Almost. Over the next week, I met with all 3 firms Clara Belmont had connected me to. Each conversation followed a similar rhythm. Praise for my track record, thinly veiled questions about which clients might follow me, and increasingly, bold compensation offers. But one firm stood out from the rest. Whitaker Group. Unlike the other firms with flashy tech decks and hypermodern language, Whitaker reminded me of Carrington and Blake in its early days. Lean, values-driven, and serious about people. The CEO, Darius Whitaker, didn't waste time trying to impress me with buzzwords. Instead, he said this: "We've followed your work for years. The clients you manage don't stay because of the firm. They stay because of you. We don't just want your book of business. We want you to help us build something lasting." They offered me a full equity partnership, something I had never been given at Carrington and Blake, despite 25 years of loyalty. I didn't say yes right away, because something else was unfolding behind the scenes. My former assistant, Leah, who still worked at Carrington, had been texting me updates every day. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. Her one-liners said it all. Harriet Lang walked out of her meeting with Melissa, furious. Douglas from Westvale just canceled their quarterly review. Whispers of board tension. People are scared. And then came the most telling message yet. 3 new resignation letters on Gavin's desk this morning, all from senior client leads. The firm was hemorrhaging, not just clients, but credibility. Still, I stayed silent. I hadn't spoken to any clients directly, hadn't criticized the firm publicly. I knew better than to invite a legal mess. Besides, I didn't have to do anything. The relationships I'd built were speaking for themselves. Then came a call that would change everything. It was Jeffrey Hammond, a senior journalist at the Chicago Business Review. His tone was polite, but direct. "Ms. Hart, I'm working on a piece about recent changes at Carrington and Blake. Several clients and former staffers have mentioned you. Would you be willing to comment?" My heart skipped. Dangerous territory. "I'm not comfortable commenting on internal matters," I said cautiously. "Understood," he replied. "But what about the fact that 7 major clients have announced they're terminating their relationships with Carrington? Sources are attributing the exodus directly to your departure." I hadn't spoken to 7 clients directly. At most, maybe 4. The rest must have spoken to each other. The ripple effect had grown into a current. "I can't speak to their decisions," I said, "but I imagine continuity and trust factor heavily into who companies choose to represent them." Then Hammond hit me with the bombshell. "Would you like to comment on the letter signed by 26 clients, demanding the board replace Gavin Royce's managing partner?" I froze. I have no knowledge of such a letter. Would you like me to send you a copy? No, thank you. After we hung up, I sat motionless in my apartment, staring out the window as Chicago pulsed quietly below. 26 clients. An organized, written demand to remove Gavin. I hadn't orchestrated any of it. But this was the result of trying to erase people like me from firms like Carrington and Blake. An hour later, Leah texted again. Emergency all-hands meeting tomorrow. Every partner flying in. Gavin looks like he's going to combust. Then, almost as if the universe needed to confirm what was happening, my phone rang again. Calvin Blake. You need to tell me right now, he said. Did you organize this client revolt? I've done nothing, Calvin. I haven't solicited a single client. Then how do you explain this? He barked. 70% of our client base is threatening to walk. The board is panicking. Investors are demanding answers. Maybe, I said, cool and even. They value relationship continuity more than your new managing partner expected. This isn't a game, Evelyn. This is 25 years of work about to collapse in 25 days. There was a certain bitter satisfaction hearing that. After being discarded like excess baggage, my absence had proven more powerful than anything I could have said. What do you want from me, Calvin? Come back, he said without hesitation. Not as chief client officer, as a full equity partner. Help us stabilize the firm. It was what I had deserved years ago. Where's Gavin in all this? I asked. The board is meeting tonight. His future will be decided before tomorrow's all-hands. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I stared at the Whitaker Group's offer letter on my desk. Elegant, lucrative, clean. Partnership there would mean peace, freedom, and a fresh start. Returning to Carrington and Blake meant navigating chaos, politics, and old wounds. Even if I walked in the door with a title, the damage had been done. The same people who watched me escorted out in silence would now be told to respect me again. And Gavin, even if he were removed, the culture he brought in wouldn't disappear overnight. But then again, these weren't just clients. They were my clients, and many of them were still caught in the storm I'd been dragged into. By 6 a.m. the next morning, I had made my decision. I picked up the phone and called Clara Belmont. I'm going with Whitaker, I said. Clara didn't skip a beat. They'll be thrilled. There's something else I need from them, I added. Something strategic. She listened, then laughed. Ruthless, Evelyn. I love it. I'll present it to them this morning. Clara called back at noon sharp. Darius Whitaker loves the idea, she said. He's already looping in his M&A team to scope a buy-in. I exhaled, half excitement, half disbelief. Less than a week ago, I'd been escorted out of my own office. Now I was the hinge on which two firms might pivot. A silence before the storm. Even with Whitaker's interest secured, everything rested on one question. Would Carrington and Blake break before the board meeting, or after? Late Tuesday night, Leah texted, Board session went past midnight. No decision yet. Rumor, Calvin offered to step down if Gavin is sacked. So Calvin was bargaining with his own legacy to stay afloat. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But sympathy had no place in the strategy forming in my head. Wednesday. The media spark. I woke to a push alert from the Chicago Business Review. Client revolt. Puts Carrington and Blake leadership in peril. Sources cite mass dissatisfaction after senior executives' abrupt dismissal. The article named no names, but the subtext screamed, Evelyn Hart. Comments from anonymous clients painted a brutal picture. Lost confidence, unstable service teams, frantic junior partners pleading for patience. Within an hour, my phone rang again. This time Gavin. I let it buzz until voicemail. His message was terse. "Evelyn, we should discuss a transition plan for your accounts. Call me." Translation: "Help me plug this leak before the ship sinks." I deleted it. Lunch with Darius Whitaker Group's offices occupied the top 2 floors of an Art Deco tower overlooking Millennium Park. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows as Darius and I reviewed a draft term sheet. "Acquiring a controlling stake won't be cheap," he said, fingers steepled. "But if 70% of their revenue is ready to walk, you and I both know Carrington's valuation is about to nosedive." He slid the sheet forward. "Partner, 9% equity, vesting immediately. Seat on Whitaker's executive committee. Authority to lead post-merger client strategy. Looks generous?" he asked. "It looks fair," I replied. Then I added the real test. "But I need one more condition. You retain all client-facing staff who want to stay. No scorched earth." Darius nodded. "Relationships before margins. That's why we want you." Handshake sealed. Thursday. The letter drops. By mid-morning, copies of the 26th client letter leaked onto LinkedIn. The tone was blistering. "Leadership has compromised trust. We demand Gavin Royce's removal and reinstatement of senior relationship leadership before renewing any contract." The post went viral in professional services circles. Carrington and Blake's brand sentiment, once sterling, plummeted in real time. I didn't celebrate. Public failures have collateral damage, but the letter confirmed one thing. The firm was now a distressed asset, ripe for acquisition. Calvin's final plea. At 2 p.m., Calvin called again. I answered this time. "Evelyn, the board just suspended Gavin pending review," he said, voice ragged. "Investors are threatening to pull funding unless we present a turnaround plan within 48 hours. "I hope you have one," I said. "You are the plan," he replied. "Come back as equity partner. We'll rebuild client trust together. Gavin will be gone by tomorrow." Emotion crept in. Calvin wasn't just saving himself. He was terrified of watching his life's work implode. "Calvin, I want to believe that," I said gently, "but 2 things still stand between us. Trust and time. You can't fix either in 48 hours. A beat of silence. "Then what happens next?" I looked out Whitaker's window, the city's grid stretching toward the lake. Something better. For the clients. For the staff who've been sidelined. And yes, even for you, if you're willing to let go. He didn't understand. Not yet. Friday dawn. Lines in the sand. Clara sent a single-line email at 6 a.m. Whitaker board approved the acquisition budget. Offer letter attached. Clock starts now. Attached was Whitaker's formal bid to Horizon Capital, Carrington's majority shareholder, an aggressive but attainable number, contingent on expedited due diligence, and my joining announcement. We were moving. At 9 a.m., I penned a short, precise memo to my key clients. "I've agreed to partner with Whitaker Group. They share our values. Your service teams will remain intact, and I will personally guide the transition. More soon. No pressure, no promise, just assurance." Responses flowed back in minutes. Thumbs-up emojis from Harriet. A simple yes from Douglas. Even cautious optimism from clients I hadn't spoken to directly. Loyalty, it appeared, was portable. The pause before impact. There was still the matter of Carrington's scheduled all-hands meeting Monday morning. Calvin expected to parade me in as the savior. Gavin expected to fight for his job. Neither expected what I was about to do. I spent Saturday in a quiet corner of the Art Institute cafe, drafting remarks for a room I might soon own. Not a victory speech. A correction. This wasn't about revenge. It was about restoring the value clients placed in relationships. Something numbers alone could never capture. Sunday evening, Leah texted a final update. Gavin cleaned out his office. Rumor. Board vote tomorrow, 8 a.m. Perfect timing. Game day Monday, 8 to 45 a.m. I walked back into 111 North Wabash, the first time since security had marched me out. Receptionists stared. Elevators felt smaller, but my steps were steady. Leah met me outside the conference room. "They think you're here to accept Calvin's offer," she whispered. "Not quite," I smiled. Inside, every seat was filled. Partners flown in from coast to coast. Junior analysts pressed against the walls. HR hovering like triage nurses. Calvin stood up front, flanked by the board. Gavin's chair was conspicuously empty. Calvin tapped the mic. "Thank you all for joining on short notice. I'm pleased to announce that Evelyn Hart has agreed to return." I stepped forward, voice calm yet carrying to the back row. "Actually, Calvin, I'm here as a representative of Whitaker Group." A hush swept the room. "As of this morning, Whitaker has tendered an offer to Horizon Capital for a controlling interest in Carrington and Blake. Pending acceptance, client services will transition under a new integrated structure, one that prioritizes the relationships we nearly lost." Gasps, whispers. Someone dropped a pen that clattered like a gavel. Calvin's face drained. "Evelyn, what have you done?" "Nothing more than recognize the value you taught me to build," I said. "Numbers are the language of business, Calvin, but relationships are its heart. You forgot that. Whitaker hasn't." The silence that followed my announcement wasn't quiet. It was deafening. Inside the Carrington and Blake conference room, shock rippled like a physical force. Board members sat frozen. Junior staff exchanged stunned glances. And Calvin Blake, the firm's founder, looked like he'd just been told the building was on fire. He stepped forward slowly. "Evelyn, this is hostile. You've orchestrated a takeover." "No," I said calmly. "It's a correction. The kind the market demands when leadership forgets what made a firm valuable in the first place." One of the senior partners, Leslie Tran, cleared her throat. "Is this true? Did Whitaker Group actually submit an acquisition offer?" I nodded. "They submitted it to Horizon Capital yesterday. The offer includes provisions to retain all client-facing staff and preserve current contracts. The transition is designed to be as seamless as possible for your clients and for the people here who still want to do the work." Gasps. A murmur from the left side of the room. Calvin looked utterly gutted. "You did this to punish me." "No, Calvin," I replied. "You punished yourself when you let Gavin Royce dismantle what we spent 2 decades building." This firm's value was never its office space or profit margins. It was the trust of the people who kept coming back, and the professionals who made that trust possible. Across the table, a junior associate raised her hand tentatively. "Does this mean we're all out of a job?" "No," I said. "Whitaker isn't gutting anyone. That was Gavin's approach. We're building, not burning." The aftermath begins. The meeting dissolved in chaos. Some people left abruptly. Others approached me quietly, shaking my hand, thanking me, whispering things like, "We were hoping you'd come back." He treated all of us like numbers. This place was never the same after you left. By the time I stepped into the elevator, my phone was already buzzing with messages from clients. Harriet Lang texted, Just heard the news. Dinner tonight. Let's talk next steps. I smiled, not because I had won, but because I'd held the line. Press reaction and professional ripples. By the following morning, the story was everywhere. Chicago Business Review. Whitaker Group acquires majority stake in Carrington and Blake. Amid client exodus. Headline: Evelyn Hart returns as partner. Without returning at all. The article only mentioned me once, 15 paragraphs in, but industry insiders knew. They called it one of the most elegant power reversals in recent consulting history. And I still hadn't said anything negative about Carrington publicly. I hadn't needed to. Integration Planning Whitaker moved quickly. I worked from their offices downtown, reviewing org charts, client accounts, and proposed team structures. Every day, former Carrington colleagues showed up, some seeking clarity, others offering awkward apologies. I always respected your work, they'd say. I didn't agree with how it was handled. I wish I'd spoken up. I didn't hold grudges, not openly, but I didn't forget either. Leah, my former assistant, was among the first I brought into the Integration Planning Committee. You were the only one who kept me informed, I told her. That matters. We designed the merger with one priority. Client trust comes first. Dominic Royce's exit. Gavin Royce, the man who fired me, quietly landed a role at a lesser-known West Coast firm 2 weeks after his removal. His name stopped appearing in leadership memos, investor updates, and eventually, LinkedIn endorsements. He faded the way people do when their arrogance outruns their competence. He had gambled on metrics. I had built relationships, and the market had rendered its verdict. A final conversation with Calvin. 2 weeks after the transition was announced, Calvin requested a meeting. I agreed. We met in a neutral downtown restaurant. Not the Harvest, not the office, just a quiet bistro near the river. He looked worn down, not from age, but from loss. You orchestrated this, he said, not accusingly, but like someone trying to solve a riddle. No, I replied. You did. When you stopped listening. When you stopped leading. He sighed. Whitaker is offering me a consulting role. 3 years. No management oversight. I suggested it, I said evenly. You built something meaningful once. I'd rather preserve that piece of you than erase it. He nodded, defeated but grateful. You control it all now. No, Calvin. I influence it. There's a difference. One you used to understand. I slid a document across the table. It detailed the advisory role and his payout terms. If you refuse, you walk with your shares, and nothing else. But if you take this, you still have a place in the story. He signed. 6 months later, Whitaker Carrington Consulting now occupied 2 floors of a gleaming tower in downtown Chicago. Client retention during the transition had held steady at 95%. Of the 3 clients who left during the Gavin era, all had returned. Revenue was up 23% year over year, and every time I walked into our glass conference room, staff didn't look away. They smiled. One afternoon, Harriet Lang arrived for lunch, dressed sharply in gray silk and pearls. "Congratulations," she said, as we reviewed the latest quarterly report. "Everyone's calling this the cleanest acquisition in the industry in a decade." I smiled. It wasn't a takeover. It was a course correction. She grinned. "You proved what I've always said. In consulting, the relationships are the real asset. Everything else is just office furniture." We clinked glasses, 6 months after my termination, and 3 months after Whitaker's acquisition of Carrington and Blake. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of our new office, watching the snow fall over downtown Chicago. The skyline looked different now, not because it had changed, but because I was no longer Evelyn Hart, the woman quietly holding up the weight of a firm behind the scenes. I was now partner, head of client strategy, and the architect of the most graceful industry power shift in recent memory. My name wasn't on the door. Not yet. But my influence shaped every decision in that building. The numbers spoke. First, our Q2 report confirmed what we already felt. The transition had succeeded beyond even our best projections. Client retention, 96.8%. Net new client growth, 12% on the revenue growth, 26%. YoY employee retention from former Carrington team, 87%. More importantly, client satisfaction scores, measured through post-engagement surveys and long-term renewal indicators, had hit a record high. We didn't just survive the merger. We redefined what legacy firms could look like when built on people, not just profit margins. Colleagues, reintroduced former Carrington colleagues, now walked our halls with renewed purpose. The ones who had once looked the other way during my dismissal, many of them quietly thanked me. I didn't seek apologies. I sought alignment. I mentored new hires, coached junior partners, and hosted open forum lunches where anyone, assistant or executive, could ask questions, raise concerns, or offer ideas. For many, it was the first time they felt heard in years. One afternoon, Alicia Martin, a young associate, stopped me near the elevator. "You're the reason I stayed," she said softly. "I had an offer from elsewhere. But when I saw how you handled everything, with dignity, but power, I knew I wanted to work for someone like you. That meant more than any title." And what of Gavin Royce? He landed, predictably, at a smaller, tech-focused firm in Seattle. Rumor had it he was struggling to retain clients even there. You can copy strategy, you can mimic language, but you can't fake trust. And that was something Gavin never understood. He valued metrics over people. I had become the metric. A call from Calvin won chilly. Friday, my assistant knocked gently. "Calvin Blake's here." He didn't call ahead. I nodded. "Send him in." He entered, older somehow, like the months had folded years into his expression. He held no papers, no pretense. "Thank you for including me," he said quietly. "This consulting role, it's more than I deserve. I don't believe in erasing history," I said, "only in learning from it." He looked around my office. The leather-bound books, the art from local Chicago artists, the carefully stacked client dossiers. "You know," he said, almost wistfully, "you should have been partnered 10 years ago." I smiled. I was, just not officially. Speaking on Legacy 3 weeks later, I gave the keynote address at the National Women in Consulting Summit. It was my first public statement, since everything had unfolded. I didn't speak of revenge or power plays. I spoke of value. They called me a relic, I told the room, a symbol of an older era of business. But they misunderstood the assignment. Relationships are not relics. They're assets, and they don't depreciate with age. They appreciate with time, with loyalty, with trust. The standing ovation lasted nearly a minute. Several attendees lined up afterward, eager to shake my hand. One whispered, "You didn't just win. You rewrote the rulebook." The final letter. Months later, I received a handwritten note from Harriet Lang. "You taught me something I'll never forget, that quiet power lasts longer than loud ambition." She enclosed a gift, a slim, engraved crystal plaque. It read, "Evelyn Hart, the heart of trust." It sat beside my desk, next to my first Carrington nameplate, a reminder of where I started and how far I'd come. The quiet ending. I never gloated. I didn't need to. The acquisition wasn't about revenge. It was about restoring balance, about showing that in an industry obsessed with scale and disruption, consistency and character still had a place, and that people like me, the ones who built quietly, were never obsolete. The truth is, I didn't burn Carrington and Blake to the ground. I simply let it collapse under its own weight, and offered something better to rise from the ashes. A firm where relationships weren't secondary. They were the foundation. Epilogue. Today, Whitaker Hart Consulting leads the Midwest in client satisfaction and industry trust metrics. Yes, they added my name to the door. Something I never asked for, but deeply appreciated. I still mentor. I still build. I still write handwritten thank you notes to every client after a successful quarter, because that's the legacy I choose. One built not on retaliation, but on recognition. Not on noise, but on quiet influence. Because in the end, they didn't just fire Evelyn Hart. They freed her, and the industry never looked the same again.